Was a girl running in our group. She had a high-speed motor in a 40 Ford Coupe. She had a racing cam and a supercharged. Look out, buddy, hot rod and large. She's a hot rod. She's a hot rod.
And I got to tell you, BID is China. BID is China. They're a car company in China. They're partly owned by Warren Buffett. And they also have a place in Hungary. They're opening one in Hungary in 2026. European Union is all set to raise tariffs on BID, so they're going to probably open one. They're trying to get one in France. So is Cherry Auto, and so is Stellantis. Tesla drops their base model of the Model Y for a new build that gets 320 miles range. Another Model Y. You got to pay more, though, if you want more battery. That's every one of these companies does that. The UAW strike at Michigan plant, well, it's coming. I think I got a story on that, too. That's a Ram and Jeep, ventilation and lighting and flooding and sanitation. Everybody's mad about that place because it smells and it's dirty. And GM caught selling data. Oh, this kills me. GM got caught selling your data, if you bought a GM car, to a third party who sells it to insurance companies to set drivers' rates. So if your rates go up unexpectedly, it's because, and you got a GM car, GM sold your personal information. France is now stepping up their electric vehicle sales, trying to compete with the Chinese. The Chinese are trying to slide into America with their cars.
So here's the thing, though. I saw an article about this. Do you have any idea what the percentage of the tariff is on the Chinese car?
Oh, it's like 25, isn't it?
27.5%.
That's great.
So, I mean, in one sense, these are $10,000 cars. So there's a lot of people that are out there that are saying, I want an EV under $25,000.
Oh, they're cheap.
This puts them in that market. And there's a lot of people that are saying, look, but here's the thing. I'm all about buy American. I've always driven an American car. But I understand this. Imagine people in California find themselves in this scenario where their government's saying, buy an electric or else. You can't afford an electric. You're already, food costs, housing costs, everything's outrageous. And now your government tells you need to buy a new car. These people are going to buy the cheapest car they can find.
Absolutely.
And if that's a Chinese car, even after tariffs, that's what they're going to buy.
You're not going to see any of these junks running down the street. You're going to see all new electric cars that are little, but they're going to be cheap.
Right. But again, going back to the question of, what are you getting? What are you getting for a $10,000 electric vehicle when the batteries are $15,000?
Here's my problem, Chuck. China, and specifically BID and a couple other companies, our car companies, have invested money in Canada.
Right.
And they're going to start building them there and shipping them here where there is.
Well, not even, so they're going to assemble them in Canada.
Right.
So it's like a big Tinker Toy kit.
Exactly. And they're going to send them over here with a regular tariff, which I think is 10%.
Yeah. Well,
or
NAFTA,
7%.
I don't even know if it's, it's not
it
even
wouldn't NAFTA, it might be nothing.
Yeah.
And they're going to sleaze in, and they're going to sneak in.
Right, just like they did with steel and everything else.
Absolutely. Did it with steel? Yes, they did.
But again, though, this is the question, though, is this is sort of like the short-sighted government, is the government is causing the problem that they'll eventually say we need to solve.
Absolutely.
They're causing the problem by forcing people to buy EVs.
They're opening the levee and saying, oh, we're flooding.
Right. We've heard that story before. But
yes, we have.
That's another story.
Oh, there's something else. Here, Mercedes dealership got sued. And this should happen to all of them. Not for allegedly, I got to say allegedly because they haven't finished it yet. Not revealing used car had flood damage, and there's a few of them floating around in America. Let me just tell you, Ronnie's looked at them. I've had my Ronnie, the manager. He'll check these guys out, and guess what?
Well, so I've told you
they're never right.
I've told you the story about we had flooding up here in our area a few years ago. And one of our cars, somebody I knew, their car was in the flood. And immediately some guy showed up, said, well, take your car. So what was in the flood? Oh, we know. We're going to, It's like, well, I think they said they're shipping it down to Mexico or something. They said, well, no, we'll get the wiring fixed and all that stuff.
Yeah, they'll redo everything.
They said, we'll take it. And it's okay.
They redo everything they say.
They say.
But they can't. You know what? I'll tell you what. Ronnie crawled under the dash of one because it smelled funny.
Yeah.
And he wanted to see the carpet and pull the carpet back.
Yeah.
He looked up behind the glove box and there was rust.
It was like there's a fish up
on
there
the inside, yeah.
Like a turtle up there living?
There may as well have been.
Well, and that's the thing, though. I mean, we see that after, especially, flooding is one thing. A hurricane is another because that's salt water.
Yes.
We've already seen the electric cars are not big fans of getting salt water.
No, they can't do salt water.
Yeah.
So if you're in Florida, you can't have an electric car. Well, you can, but you got to keep it inside. All right. A customer has accused this South Carolina Mercedes dealership group of fraud, negligence, breach of contract, and a consumer protection law violation for failing to disclose that the used 2018 Mercedes-Benz E300, which isn't their real fancy one, but she had bought, had flood damage and a replacement engine. So apparently the guy tried to drive it through a big puddle. Mercedes-Benz of Mount Pleasant had repaired the flood damage and replaced the engine for the previous owner, according to the March 25th lawsuit by Michela Powell and her lawyer Joshua Slavin of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Now, this doesn't... these guys at Mercedes knew this. The complaint said Baker Motor Company, which owns the dealership, sold the E300 new in September 2017 to its first owner, reacquired it 3 months later, and resold it to the second owner in March of 2018. The store did more than $30,000 worth of flood-related work for the second owner. Yow. The dealership acquired the car again in the summer of 21 and sold it as a certified pre-owned vehicle to this lady Powell for $44,222 in November 2021. Now, Powell said the dealership didn't tell her about the prior damage and repairs, and Slavin said they presented her with a clear Carfax report. In other words, none of these repairs were reported to Carfax,
right,
or the insurance company. Somebody paid for them. That's got to be the world's first $200,000 Mercedes. Been sold 3 times, $30,000 worth of flood damage. And the last time it sold, it was, 2017 to 2021. It's 4 years old. $44,222. For God's sakes. During the next 5 months, while in the store's possession, the car became infested with mold and mildew. Oh, good. According to the suit, the store issued a new work order that included $15,735 to repair the moldy interior due to vehicle sitting for so long with moisture inside. I know you've seen them. When they're wet inside, they sit outside in the summer and the windows fog up. You can't see inside. An appraiser determined it to be a total loss in January of 2023. Powell is asking for about $77,000 in damages for the value of the vehicle, loss of use, and damage caused by improper storage, plus punitive damages and attorney fees. A lawyer for the dealership did not respond with requests for comment. Can you go figure? He's not saying a word. I can't imagine. Why wouldn't he tell you, hey, we sold you a piece of garbage? You got to love it. But these guys, hey, if you can get away with it, God bless you. I'm not wild about it, but all right. Tesla is laying off more staff in the software and service teams. Electric vehicle maker Tesla has launched another round of layoffs, including staff from the software service and engineering departments. Electrek reported on Monday, citing emails and sources familiar with the matter. The move comes after the Elon Musk-led automaker disbanded its EV charging department that we talked about last week, following Tesla's announcement last month that it was reducing its global workforce by more than 10%. Elon's a good businessman. He knows how to cut the cost.
Well, and so I know it's got a lot of people, it's raising some eyebrows, but also, that's how the real world works.
Absolutely.
When you're selling less cars, you don't wait 5 years.
Well, that's the same people that think that the millionaires are the bad guys.
Right.
In the
It's
whole
Elon.
world.
It's Elon stealing your money and keeping it under his bed.
Yeah,
Right.
under his bed. You know what? God bless those guys that work hard and made it.
Right.
I mean, if they made something out of themselves, just because you didn't doesn't make them bad guys.
You mean we shouldn't charge them 90% taxes because they made something of themselves?
Because they made something of themselves and you didn't,
You're gonna get phone calls.
I'm just, I know. I'm just a technician. I'm just a motor mechanic. I don't know. What do I know? Tesla, whose shares were up about 1%, did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment. Of course, the stock goes up. He's cutting costs. He's making the company more solvent.
Right.
He's got to. So the workers, they're workers and they got to be laid off. The company disclosed in notices last month that it will lay off more than 6,700 employees across its locations in Texas, California, Nevada, and New York. 6,700, boy, that's a lot of people. The company is looking to focus on autonomous driving software, robotaxis, and its humanoid robot Optimus. I saw that. And Musk could be cutting its spending on certain teams to preserve cash for those products. Exactly. He knows what he's doing. This is what analysts have said. The company said in April it was working on new models that would use its current platforms and production lines, a move that is expected to let it better control capital expenditures.
So why don't we have got a related story to the self-driving? You want to hit that before we go to the break? 'Cause this is interesting that the timing on this, that he announces this, he's laying everybody off, but he also at the same time announced the upcoming launch, like you said, of robotaxi, which is interesting. And so I don't know if that means that those are his vehicles or Hertz, or do I let my Tesla become a taxi? That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I want to find out more about that.
Is he building them for a specific company?
Right.
Like Uber or
like a Waymo kind of situation.
Like a Waymo situation.
And it's interesting. So they're talking about version 12.4 of the full self-driving.
Well,
I know it's not self-driving, but if there's taxis and there's nobody behind the wheel of a taxi, it's self-driving.
It is. And I'm going to tell you something. If this particular system that he's getting into, this area, is a little gray right now.
Right.
Some of these startups are making it, and some of them are going down the chute.
Well, and what was really interesting is he's talking about upcoming versions of full self-driving. He mentioned something that really caught my eye. He says, we're getting into rare, complex situations. For example, going down a narrow one-way road, encountering a road closure, having a reverse. The closure also needs to be communicated to the rest of the fleet so you don't get a whole bunch of Teslas stuck down a road. What does that sound like to you? It sounds like what happened to Waymo a few weeks ago.
Well, they were all one road. They were all stuck.
The highway was closed. They couldn't go on the highway, so they had to stop, and they didn't know what to do, and they all got stacked up. So
I think Cruise had a similar situation at one time.
Was it Waymo? Or I thought it was Waymo's. But
no, I think they both had it.
So same idea, though, is that he's understanding that, what we talked about last week. It's easy to get on a highway, well-marked highway, roads open, lanes, just follow traffic. That's easy.
That's where self-driving works.
Right. But he's talking about these scenarios again where you're in a taxi and all of a sudden the road's closed and the taxi doesn't, like, what are you just going to sit there and wait for the taxi?
If you're in a big city, you got to drive down the alley because that's where the guy's entrance to his
and that's the
apartment
thing, though, is, like even my wife the other day, she was trying to get somewhere and we knew the roads would be closed. I said, look, I know the GPS isn't going to be right. I'm from that area. I know how to, why don't we just go out there and figure it out? Because even the GPSs hadn't been updated with all the road closures.
Oh,
and stuff. So it's like you said, we literally had to drive through an alley. I said, look,
we have all that in Lansing.
Ignore the GPS, go the wrong way down the one-way street, go down the alley, and again, what would Tesla do if it had to get to that same spot? It wouldn't know what the hell to do.
Oh, I know.
It would just sit there and go, all the roads are closed. I don't know how to get there.
We got the main drag in Lansing here close. It took me 15 minutes to go a block and a half, and that's just insane. Oh well. Good. I wanted to tell you about Elon going into this little fiasco he calls self-driving or robo-taxis, because these things they're either going to make it or they're not.
Okay.
There's a self-driving startup, Motional, has delayed its commercialization plans and laid off an undisclosed number of employees Tuesday, according to Carl Ignema. And this is a Hyundai-sponsored group. $900 million to be exact. Hyundai just shot them $900 million to keep them afloat. Emotional spokesperson declined to say how many employees were affected. Well, guess what? They're all going down. The company has struggled to move beyond testing to commercialize its robo-taxis in a meaningful way as rival Waymo has opened driverless commercial service in multiple metro areas. Motional has tested vehicles in multiple cities and concentrated the commercialization efforts around the robotaxi in Vegas and Los Angeles. Here, GM-backed self-driving firm Momenta, there's another one I didn't even know about this one, is working with China International Capital, Goldman Sachs USB Group, on a potential listing that may happen this year. They're trying to get an IPO. They're going to try and raise some money by putting up stocks. Going to have stocks. Momenta was also said to be considering an IPO in the U.S. or Hong Kong earlier last year, at the time aiming to raise as much as $1 billion. Well, they want to raise some big money. It's a Chinese company, and little-known self-driving startup is raising $1 billion from NVIDIA, Microsoft, and SoftBank. It's called Wavy, W-A-Y-V-E. Is that how you say that, Chuck? Wavy?
I think so.
All right, well, you're the engineer here. In a UK startup with a A1, artificial intelligence-focused approach to solving autonomy for cars. It's akin to a vehicular version of ChatGPT. Now, what is that, Chuck? ChatGPT. I see that all over.
Okay, so let's we'll use that as my.
What does that stand for?
It stands for ChatGPT. I'd have to Google it. This is a whole complicated thing. Just imagine. Remember the movie The Terminator? You're basically talking to the Terminator, and he's deciding what he wants to do with you. It's a complicated thing, but basically imagine you're talking to an AI. So ChatGPT, you can ask it questions. You can ask it, you can ask it how many states there are. You can ask it to tell you. You can ask it for stock advice. You can ask it for relationship advice, and it will essentially comb the internet and give you an answer.
Oh, that's like a really good Siri or Alexa.
It's kind of like an AI Siri, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so so there's all kinds of people that are saying that AI is going to replace all sorts of different jobs and all these things, but to be honest though, think of it right now. It's like a buzzword. So a lot of people, like a few years ago when we started talking about Bitcoin, everybody started talking about blockchain technology and all this stuff. It's a buzzword that people are going to put. They're going to start saying there's AI Big Macs or something. There's AI in your whatever. So just be wary of that because it's a buzzword to get your attention.
ChatGPT is definitely artificial intelligence.
It's probably
generated.
Yes. So it's the AI. So in theory, you're asking AI for advice. But the other question is, even though it's artificial intelligence, I always say somebody programmed that intelligence. Somebody programmed it with a certain set of parameters. So like anybody else, be wary of the answer.
I understand.